look at, we have an annual meeting in San Diego next week, and for the California Lawyers Association. This would be a great opportunity for all of you to get involved. There's a free day for students. It's called the Law Students Track, but I'm pretty sure if you registered as an undergrad student, they probably wouldn't know the difference. So if you want to, next week at the Hilton Bayfront Hotel, I think their Thursday is a free day, and this is like a $695 value. So you get to go to some of the events, meet people, network, and be around lawyers, about 500 lawyers for a day. So if it's something you're interested in, register at the link. It's free for law students for the one day. And then let me know if you're in town, and we can make it a point to connect when we're there. So, sound good? All right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be, with all of you, and always enjoy speaking to the Pre-Law Society. And you guys have always done a great job with bringing people in and getting some insight. I wish this group would have existed when I was actually at UCLA going to undergrad, because I think it would have given me a lot of insight about law school. Thankfully, I had a mentor who was an attorney in New York who really kind of explained a lot to me about the profession, and ended up recommending a book to me that was entitled something like "So You Really Want to Be a Lawyer," and sort of a funny title, but very applicable to really a lot of you folks in terms of looking where I was in terms of looking at going to law school. So I've got some questions that I'm going to take a look at in terms of some questions that were provided to me, but I'll start with a little bit of background. And I'm not sure if, I assume that it was already explained to me or explained to you folks, sort of my practice area and my little bit of my background, maybe my bio. That was already shared with everybody.
I know that you're a sports attorney, so.
Okay, cool. So grew up in Los Angeles, went to UCLA for undergrad, went to Thomas Jefferson in San Diego for law school. Spent 6 years after law school there, so 9 years total in San Diego. Absolutely loved it, but eventually moved back to LA where I grew up, because that's just where the industry is in terms of entertainment and sports, and was serious about my career. And so I made that move. Could have stayed in San Diego, but it's just a smaller environment, and I think for where I was at in my career, I really wanted to explore more. And I had always wanted to be an attorney from a young age. My mother asked me when I was 6 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I think my response was president of the United States and a lawyer. Of course, she laughed and said, "Well, why?" And I said, "Well, I like to help people and I like to argue." Of course, I really don't like to argue. I like to put deals together and really sort of despise arguing, but I think that kind of set me on a path for going to law school, but I didn't know what the pathway was or what that was going to look like, but here we are 11 years into running my own practice. So long story short, I watched a ton of Law and Order episodes and thought, hey, this might be great, basically becoming a district attorney. But once I interned in law school and worked for a couple of civil litigation firms, even before law school and during law school, and then working for the public defender, I just realized that wasn't for me. And I had the opportunity to compete in a baseball arbitration competition at Tulane Law School down in New Orleans, and loved the experience, realized this is where I need to be in terms of that career field. I started to go back to my passions as a kid, which were always entertainment and sports. I grew up in Hollywood and in and around Hollywood and in and around the industry, and loved sports, played sports. So I thought this was perfect for me if I can find a way to make money from this and make a career out of it. And then I started the National Sports Law Negotiation Competition and ran that for a few years as a side hustle. And then when I graduated from law school, and I ran that competition for about 7 years. So even after law school, I was working for the Superior Court as a clerk down in San Diego. And I just began to really sort of think about what's my next steps. I didn't want to be a government attorney. I didn't want to work for the public defender or the DA. I didn't want to work for a big firm. So I'll go ahead. I thought there was a question, maybe.
No, you started glitching out for a second, but I think you're good now, so.
Okay, sorry.
No
So,
problem.
so I started to sort of think about what to do and next steps. And I was like, well, I'm going to start my own practice, and I was pretty naive in that, and pretty naive in jumping into one of the hardest professions you can, in terms of legal, but also starting your own business and then doing it in entertainment and sports. But had a lot of mentors, a lot of friends, and started it. And I got lucky in some sense by trademarking California Sports Lawyer, because I didn't want to be named the law offices of Jeremy Evans or Evans Law Group. And so here we are 11 years later. But my practice is all transactional, negotiating contracts for athletes, entertainers, studios, advertising agencies, businesses, sports teams, everything to do with drafting, negotiating contracts, and IP, so intellectual property with regard to trademark and copyright. And if I could get into some specific questions, and by the way, feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand, ask questions throughout. I want this to definitely be engaging and helpful for each of you. And so when and why did I decide to go to law school, or why the law was right for me? As a kid, I did some acting. I did, had some, participated in some plays, played sports. One thing that always scared me about entertainment and sports from an actor or athlete standpoint was the fact that you have a shelf life, right? Beauty fades, talent fades. And I thought, I want to have a long career, number one. Secondly, I wanted to do the things that most movies talk about, right? Movies often talk about lawyers or talk about certain stories about individuals. I wanted to live that story, as opposed to being the person who's told it. But that being said, as I've gotten older, I've gotten into script writing and gotten into writing stories and that sort of thing. And so in some sense, it's come full circle. But and I think as an athlete, it's tough, right? Because you do have a shelf life. And I think you're often thinking about, or you should be thinking about, what you're going to do after your career in professional sports. And of course, the percentage of folks who actually make it into the professional ranks is pretty rare. We're talking 1% of high school athletes go on to a Division I school. 1% of those athletes get drafted or play in a professional sport. And probably less than 1% of those folks actually spend, more than 5 to 10 years in that profession. So I think for me, I thought the law was a great place to have a degree, to meet people, to negotiate. There was a lot of famous people who were lawyers that did good things. And I thought, hey, let me give that a shot. And this seems like a great place to have a career, and a great place to be in a career if I can build it right and do it right. Of course, I already mentioned earlier where I attended undergrad, which is UCLA, law school at Thomas Jefferson in San Diego, and then Pepperdine for an LLM and an MBA, which of course the MBA was important to me because I wanted to have that business knowledge, but also to meet different people and to learn a different skill set. My law school experience, I absolutely loved it. Had an absolutely fantastic time. Most people won't tell you that, but I went to a great school, met a ton of people, ended up becoming Student Bar Association president. I was the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, was the 1L class rep, and also vice president throughout the different 3 years that I was there. I put on a ton of panels. I put together a barrister's ball. We had a lot of fun. We met a lot of people, a lot of folks from law school I'm still friends with, still talk with the professors. The other day I was talking with a professor of mine who's thinking about going to Africa because I had just gotten back from there. So it's just this great big community, and I've absolutely loved it, and no regrets at law school at all. The only thing I wish I would have done differently would be to study harder and do better on the LSAT. the LSAT, and I can't emphasize that enough. The LSAT is really the end all be all, along with GPA, to get you into law school. And it's not that the best law school is the answer. You can still go to, really, any accredited, law school and get, a good education and of course, but the things I would be looking at are what are the bar passage rates from that law school if you want to practice law. And secondly, what does the alumni network look like? Because I think for me, and also where is the law school? Because there's a 95% chance that where you go to law school is where you end up practicing law. So think about that as you spend the next 3 years of your life, where you're going to school. But the LSAT is so important, and I would focus on that because you want options, you want choices, right? You don't want to be forced into making a decision. And of course, the better you do on the LSAT, the better GPA you have. That those two things combined, you're going to get some options, get to go to a good school, and probably get some scholarship money. So I had a blast in law school. Other people maybe not so much, but I did. I mentioned obviously the LSAT application process is important. Make sure to kind of divide your applications into 3 parts in terms of the schools 3 groups, I should say, that you apply to. Have your sort of top-notch schools, have your sort of middle rank schools, and then have your sort of schools you'll get into. I just say that because, again, you want options, and you don't want to be like me and apply to 17 schools, get denied to all of them, and then because you didn't do so well on the LSAT, you applied to all the top tier schools like Harvard and Yale and UCLA and Stanford and Michigan, and then look at and then having to wait to apply again and all that. But anyway, just do good on the LSAT, get a good GPA, talk with mentors, have informational interviews. So different than what you're doing right now is I would set aside the time to meet with people, connect on LinkedIn with lawyers that you look up to, or you like their career or whatever. I already mentioned earlier about the type of law that I practice and why I do it. I love it. I love what I do. It's tough though. It's tough making money. It's tough being an entrepreneur. It's hard building a legal business, but I do love it. I wouldn't change it. I think the only thing I'll look forward to the future is looking for a way to leverage some relationships for a front office role. I will always be an entrepreneur, and I'll probably always run my practice, but I think it'd be great to have sort of an in-house counsel role, something to maybe even get into more of the operations side, the GM stuff. I do love analytics and player assessments and scouting and things like that. So we'll see where that goes. I do love writing and podcasting, and I've got a podcast I put out every week. So I've really enjoyed sort of building those things and doing those things. But the one thing I would sort of share with everybody is this idea, something that I've done over the years, is focused in on geography, branding, and community. So you need to be where the action is happening. You need to be creating and establishing and maintaining a brand for yourself, and getting involved in community things and taking on leadership opportunities. What do I mean by that? Geography is all about presence, in person and digitally. So it's attending conferences, it's showing up, it's being available. Those things are, and of course, it's being in the place where the action is happening. So if you're looking to get in sports and entertainment, you probably need to be in Los Angeles or Las Vegas or New York or Miami, Tampa Bay. Look at these places where we have a big area of sports entertainment, and sort of realize, do they have schools there? Do they not? That sort of thing. And of course, it's not the end all be all. Just because you go to a school in the state doesn't mean you're going to end up there. I'm just saying, make it easy on yourself, or easier on yourself. Think smarter versus work harder, right? And I guess as far as branding goes, you might be thinking, oh, well, I'm only in school. No, branding's everything. And I'm always impressed by folks who have a LinkedIn page and who are building things and doing podcasts and making phone calls and writing, for your student newspaper. There's so many different things that you can do to get your name out there and to start promoting yourself, frankly. Part of this business is being is being present. So I sort of highly encourage that, and not in a salesy way. You know, you're just providing information, sharing things about your passions, which I think people enjoy. The last piece is community. No different than the group that you're in right now, the Pre-Law Society, is look for ways that you can connect with people, look for ways to build panels, look for ways to connect with professionals in the field, look for ways to get involved in leadership. And I think those things will open up some serious doors for you. So I will stop right there for a moment and see if there's any questions from the class.
Chris.
Hey, Jeremy. This is Chris Baker. I'm sitting right here.
Hey, Chris.
I was just wondering, how early on when you opened your firm, how did you market yourself? How did you expand your own brand in like an already like really established field?
Well, that's a good question, Chris, and it's so great to see you. And Chris was obviously one of the early ones that invited me in, and I think I've been doing this since 2015, which is crazy to think about. But so to your point, Chris, which is such a good question, one of the fears that you have when you start a business is, where do the clients come from, right? And I think for me, it was a situation where I was like, okay, first of all, let me talk to my friends and family. Let's do that and see if there might be some avenues for referrals there. People might need some contract work done. The next was social media, building a website, putting out content, being relevant. The whole content is king thing. Joining organizations where I could get referrals from people. I think having the trademark name was helpful. Obviously, providing great legal services was essential to get additional referrals. One of the other things that I did, which was very practical, to your question, Chris, was when I first started my practice, I literally Googled, how do you start a law practice? And I got some ideas for some books, read some of those books. And one of the pieces of advice from one of those books was make a list of 5 people you look up to and respect, reach out to them, take them out to coffee, lunch, dinner, have a phone call with them, text them, email them, whatever. And ask them questions. How do you get started? How did you do this? How did you get your first client? How do you keep overhead down? All the questions you have for a fellow business owner. And that was so helpful because it gave me a lot of insight and saved me a lot of heartache and headache and time by doing that, because I got a lot of wisdom from that. What I didn't realize was happening was I was also marketing myself. Because anytime you have those conversations, it's natural to ask the question, for somebody else to ask a question of you, well, what are you doing? Why are you asking these questions? Or literally, you would probably start with that point of, hey, I'm opening my own business. How can I ask you some questions about yours? And I think that helped a lot, because next thing you know, after about 3 months, I met with 60 different lawyers, and now I had 60 either stronger friendships or new friends or new acquaintances or colleagues, all of which now knew I was going to practice sports and entertainment. So, but that's, again, I didn't start it that way. It's not, well, I met with those folks, but as it turned out, it ended up being a marketing exercise. So hopefully that answers your question.
Absolutely, thank you.
If anyone has questions in the Zoom, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute and ask as well. Do we have any other questions in here? No more questions in the main room for now, Jeremy. If you want to have more?
So, as far as, some of the stuff that I work on, I mean, most recently I worked on a case, I'd say a matter versus case because I'm not a litigator, but I brokered a couple major deals for Yonex and Fila for my client, Brandon Nakashima, who's a top 50 tennis player, and then got to go see him in Wimbledon. Just an amazing experience. Recently did a deal for a documentary and distribution that was done with Clint Eastwood. Work with a lot of writers and directors and models, and also recently did a deal with the NBA. I've worked with Major League Cricket. I've worked with Major League Baseball teams. Just had a lot of different experiences. but it's all contracts, it's all drafting. It's all copyright and trademark and licensing of those different copyrights and trademarks. I would say some of the sort of upcoming issues with regard to sports, entertainment, and things to look out for. Obviously, one is sports gambling. That's a big issue. NIL is another big issue in college sports specifically. The growth of niche sports, so things like pickleball and volleyball and all these different leagues that are popping up. There's even a horse racing league that's starting. There's just a lot of different opportunities. I would say the regulation of sports in general through the NCAA. Those are going to be some big issues coming up, I think, in sports. But any questions from folks?
Do you have
Don't be
questions?
shy.
Yeah, we've got one in the back, and if you can't hear her, I will repeat the question. So,
what are your work hours like, and what are your employees like?
so could you hear the question, Jeremy?
Yeah, I heard. What are your work hours like? What was the second piece?
And what are your employees' work hours like?
Awesome, great. So no employees. I'm on my own. True solo practitioner. It's always been that way. I like it that way. It's nice. It's easy. It's flexible. And nobody's relying on me, so it's good. As far as work hours, I mean, look, some days are crazy, and you're up at, this morning I was up at 6:30 in the morning giving a presentation to a University of North Carolina, and 30 minutes before I got on with you folks, I was on with the University of Miami, and then of course now with San Diego State, right? It's answering emails, it's reading the trades, front office sports, Hollywood Reporter, keeping up on the times. It's emailing clients, texting clients, setting up meetings, setting up my 40th birthday party. So, which is coming up pretty quick here, which is going to be epic, by the way. But anyway, so that's sort of the typical day. But some days you're up early and you're out, you're back late. But I love what I do. I love the freedom of it. I love being able to choose my own clients. Client interview is so important, because you wouldn't want to work with somebody that you don't get along with. And I often find that my clients mirror my personality, and when they don't, we don't get along. And I'm a pretty agreeable person. But what I find when you're dealing in business is if a person is not willing to pay a fee or be reasonable or listen to your advice, it's probably not worth it to have them as a client. And you'd be better off just not taking the money and working, and have them work with somebody else, because it's just a headache. But I would say my hours are flexible. And frankly, that's such a good question that you asked, because for me, I try not to focus on the hours, and I just focus on the results. And I focus on the time that I'm spending on something versus not. I think that the business model in the law probably needs to change, and is changing. And I hope does change, and moving away from the focus on the billable hour. I haven't had billable hours in my entire career. Anytime I've had a job or a client that required billable hours, I couldn't stand it. I'm usually going to flat fee clients and tell them I'll charge them a flat fee to do a certain project. Or if I do hourly, they're going to pay me a retainer up front. I learned early on in collections that it's always good to get paid up front. So I've never had a problem with an unpaying client, because I'm always getting the money in advance and doing the work, right? Because if you don't get paid up front, often clients will go, well, you didn't give me the result I wanted, I don't have to pay you, So that's sort of that. There's one thing I wanted to add, and we can go back to questions again as I'm thinking about this, is there was talk about the differences a little bit between sports agents and an attorney. So sports agents, you're talking about representing talent directly. You're usually certified through a players union or players association. There's a process to do that. For example, the NFL, you have to have a graduate degree to be an agent. Other leagues don't have those high of requirements. They do have requirements. You usually register in the state where you're going to be representing clients as a talent agent or a sports agent. Talent agent process is different for entertainment. You got to go through a different process, but that's mostly for California and New York, where the entertainment industries are really based. and really mostly in California, specifically in Los Angeles and the Hollywood area. So, but there's some major differences between lawyers and agents. I'm not an agent. For a while, in the beginning of my practice, I did some agency work for baseball players, but you can't be registered as a certified agent in baseball until you have a player on a 40-man roster. So, and that never happened for me. And I think eventually it came to the point where I just had to learn a lesson as to, agency wasn't working out. I wasn't making any money off of it, and it's a tough business. And you're constantly trying to recruit clients, and some of the clients require you to pay for their training and all. And I just said, I can't do it. I'm worried about my own expenses in business, and I've worked way too hard to be paying clients to work with me, right? The agency business is hard, and there's some people I could introduce you to, and we can talk more offline about the agency business, but I'm not an agent, so I may not be the best person to talk to, but often when I talk to agents, they tell me the same thing, that they're tired, they're worn out, and they don't like their jobs. But that's not to discourage you from doing it. It's for you to go with your eyes wide open, that you understand what you're getting into. And of course, there's some rules with regard to lawyers where you might have some issues. So in the agency business, everything's about prospecting, right? Talking to clients, you're getting in DMs of athletes, and you're trying to get to represent them. As a lawyer, you can't do any of that stuff, at least legally and ethically. You can't have in-person contact in California. You cannot have in-person contact with a prospective client unless there's a prior personal relationship. There are some people who sort of don't follow these rules, but for me, I just didn't want to take the risk. It wasn't worth it to me. So just something to keep in mind is difference between lawyers and agents, and some of the intricacies and difficulties of being an agent. But good question in the back there, and I'll take any other questions.
Okay, we got two. We'll go with the one in the very back first, and just speak really loudly.
All right. When you look back at your career and like the deals you made and the moments you had, is there like one specific experience or moment that like stands out as your favorite?
Good question. I guess most recently it's probably the Wimbledon experience, being there with my client, closing those deals. It was a very proud moment. It was awesome. I guess going back a few years, I was trying to put a deal for a race car driver that I still represent. Was trying to put a deal together for him for some money, because race car driving is all about money, and about 20 million for a NASCAR team, and probably closer to 50 to 100 million for a Formula One team, and very expensive. But I was trying to put some money together and invited out some investors into the track, and absolutely epic. He won the race. Not only did he win the race, but he broke the track record, which was also his own track record, and just absolutely amazing talent. And his first name was Race. So just really fantastic. Born and raised with the Race name. Those are probably two of the highlights. But it's funny to me because it's not the closing of the deal that I love. I do love that. I love the build up to it. I love the getting things together. I love bringing parties together and coming to terms. That to me is amazing. There is satisfaction in closing, but yeah, anyway, I love the journey. So good question.
And then
There was
Nicole,
another
you had a
question.
What are things one must know before starting their own practice?
Well, you got to just know how tough it's going to be. The path is hard. You got to pick a field. You got to know what field you're going to get into based on your passions and your skill set. You got to have a set of mentors and people that you can rely on for sample contracts or documents or what have you. You have to be dedicated to learning and dedicated to the challenges. I would almost encourage you to have a set of bad experiences so you learn from them and you grow from them. You know, one of the most powerful things I've heard recently was Michael Jordan talking about all the times that he lost. And, you know, obviously basketball great. And he, you know, it's sort of, it's fascinating because he's like, if I didn't lose, I wouldn't know how to win. And there's so much truth in that. But I think a lot of times people stop at the losing part and they don't try again. They get discouraged by it. So I think just be prepared for the difficulty, prepare for the strategy, you know, prepare for the challenges that you're going to go through, and just go into it eyes wide open. Talk with as many people as you can, get good advice. That would be my advice for starting a law practice. But of course, my way is not the only way. You can go work for the government. You can go work for a big law firm. You can work in-house counsel somewhere. You know, I didn't have those options really. And part of that was because I was so busy in school with leadership. But also just because I had an interest in building my own business and building a brand. And so anyway, that's sort of the story.
Okay, do we have any other questions right now? Charlotte?
You mentioned you read some books when you were like starting your practice and just like getting into the legal industry. And I was just wondering what books you would recommend.
So let me pull that up. I recently emailed this to a student at Pepperdine. Okay, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School by Mark McCormick, and I'll put this in the chat as well. Powerhouse by James Andrew Miller. It's the story of the Creative Artists Agency. Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, and Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. So I'm going to put this in the chat so folks can share it. But yeah, those are some books. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a big one. Let's see here. Well, it's not going to let me do that. The message was too long. Let me just see if I can do the books by themselves. And if you folks who want to reach out, I'm happy to chat, separately. So just let me know, okay?
Yeah, that'd be great if you want to put your email or how they can contact you in the chat as well. That would be a good way for them to contact you.
There you go. Put my contact info. Any other questions?
Yeah, Jeremy, I've got one. So I'm behind the camera, so you can't see me. But I was wondering if you could tell us about any other legal entities or organizations you're involved in besides the bar.
So with the Sports Lawyers Association, I was the outreach captain for years and put on a ton of events with the Lakers and the Kings and the Dodgers, and a ton with the Padres, where we would have education and then, do a social event and watch a game. So did that for a while, just coming to an end of my term as president for the California Lawyers Association. And then I'm on the Rose Bowl Board of Advisors. I'm an adjunct professor at Cal State Long Beach in their graduate sport management program. I also teach for American Military University. I'm involved with other local bars as well. LA County, San Diego County Bar Association. But yeah, those are some of the big ones. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we've got one in the back.
What would you say you did as an undergrad or in law school, kind of relating to that you would like recommend or like definitely not recommend for us to be doing right now, like in like getting involved in stuff like that?
Yeah, I think, just build relationships, reach out to lawyers, reach out to law students, have conversations with them, build relationships. You can read books, that deal with the law in terms of like reading books from lawyers who write about their experiences in the law would probably be really helpful. Trying to think of the name of this book. See if I can find it. It's about, So You Really Want to Be a Lawyer. It's what my mentor recommended to me. See if I can find it and I'll put it in the chat for you guys. Here we go. It's on Amazon for $19.97. And it's on Kindle for $13.99, and it's free on audiobook with a free trial. So you got some options. I'll put this in the chat. I think reading, creating relationships is great. You're probably going to be hard pressed to find an internship as a non-law student or graduate. But or a legal job in general, but there is some opportunities, again, just create relationships, get good grades, focus on the LSAT. Those are your big things about getting into the school that you want to get into and preparing for it. But, law school, you really can't prepare for law school other than to talk with law students and talk with lawyers and to give them your experiences. It's going to be, it's going to be hard. They say they scare you to death your first year, they work you to death your second year, and they bore you to death your third year. That's probably true. But again, I had a good time in law school, enjoyed my classes, get involved with negotiation competitions and mock trials and things like that, get involved with student clubs, get involved with leadership. Those are all big things, I think, for me, at least in my experience with law school.
More questions? Okay, we've got one in the far back, so just try to be as loud as you can.
Did you know you wanted to get into entertainment law, like before you started out in law school or undergrad, or did it kind of like come to you?
Yeah, good question. No, it's okay. I got it. Thanks. So good question. I did not know that. I had no interest in entertainment and sports growing up other than watching it and playing in it. Didn't even think there was a career field in that way, even though I watched Jerry Maguire. I just didn't even think about pursuing that. Maybe I was interested in some way, but no, it was really more through experiences through law school and prior to law school that I realized that through trial and error, experiencing things and not liking them. I didn't like working at a big firm. I didn't like working for the public defender. And when I say I didn't like them, I had I learned things there. I had fun experiences, met great people, but it was not something I wanted to do long term, right? And I was willing to take that jump. And I think for each of you, the lesson learned is you have to be willing to take a risk, and you have to be willing to say no. And one of the most depressing things I hear from people, and I hear it often from 20, 30, 40-year practicing attorneys and other people in general, is like, oh, you're doing what I wanted to do. In some sense, it's great for me because the competition is less, but it is a competitive area regardless. And it's why most people quit. But it's just go into it eyes wide open if you really want to get into this career field. But no, it was not something that I knew early on. It was something that I had to go back to, really my passions as a child to figure out what I wanted to do through trial and error, through building of those competitions I mentioned. That was really sort of how I came about to coming into entertainment and sports.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. We have no more questions. Does anyone have any questions in the Zoom? If you would like to unmute, you can do that. But otherwise, you talk a lot about networking. And since we don't have a pre-law program at San Diego State University, it's kind of hard for students to connect with other hopeful students, unless it's through an organization like us. But what sort of networking events would you recommend outside of the university that we should keep a lookout for that are worth our time?
Sure. So the San Diego County Bar Association is great. There is a lot of affinity and specialty bars as well. So like you have like the Women's Lawyers Association, you have La Raza Lawyers. I mean, there's just a lot of different organizations. I think there's a Democrat Lawyers Club. There's a Republican National Lawyers Association, RNLA. There's just a ton of different opportunities. I just put the link to the San Diego County Bar in there. There's opportunities to write in their journal, meet their lawyers, go to their events. That to me would be a great place to start and see where that takes you. There's California Lawyers for the Arts, which is, there's some volunteer opportunities there. That's what I would do. I would start to poke around the internet, see what you can find, see what legal opportunities are in San Diego, and look for ways to get involved, and to network. But the reality of it is too, is that a lot of your colleagues or your colleagues in class will be your colleagues later on. So one of my regrets from undergrad at UCLA is that I'm a very social person, but I didn't spend a lot of time at social events at UCLA. One, because the curriculum was very difficult and it was very hard to keep up. But I really wish I would have spent more time going out and meeting people, and I would encourage that with each of you. And if you can find a balance between that and grades, awesome. But what I've also found too is that the grades are important to get you into law school as well as the LSAT, but it's probably not going to land you a job, because it's going to be the relationships that are going to land you the job. And that may sound crazy after going through all this school, but that's just the truth. People hire who they like, and people hire who they think are similar to them. And that may seem unfair or whatever, but those are the folks running the business, and they want people around them that they know they can get along with. So it's really about becoming somebody who's likable. And that means, and this is not to be fake, it's to work on yourself to be a passionate person, to be somebody who is a caring person, somebody who listens, somebody who's not always trying to talk all the time. These are all things that you folks can be working on in terms of bettering your social interactions and your elevator pitch and how you talk with people and how you listen. So these are all things that I would be working on and thinking about for networking.
Okay, great. I'll double check. Do we have any more questions? Okay, I have just one more question, and we might let you go a little early. But when in the course of going through law school or working with other lawyers and generally just meeting people, who was more successful, and could you identify why they were more successful or why they did better in their specific position?
Let me think about that. I think it was the folks who are willing to take risk, the folks who are willing to, put everything on the line to be successful. Remember, I was talking with a mentor one time, and she had we were talking about my career, and I said, man, it would just be so easy to go to an in-house counsel job or do something that just paid me money and close my practice. And she gave me the opposite advice, and I'll always remember this. And she said, double down on what you got, and it'll pay off. And I did. I doubled down, went back to school, got 2 graduate degrees in entertainment and sports, moved back to LA. And it was a big risk. I love San Diego. I loved being there. But I think for me, that opened up a lot of doors. But I look at people who have been successful. It's people who have taken risks. It's people who have had good influences in their life. It's good people who have had support, whether that's sort of mentally or financially. I didn't really have many of those things. I had a lot of friends, but I had to build something from scratch. And so, yeah, that would be, I think, my advice or my insight as to who I look up to. I'm also a values guy. I mean, to me, values are the most important thing, how somebody treats you, how they treat their family, because those are the things you take with you, was it Denzel Washington, famous actor, of course, had this great line where he said, you don't see too many hearse following a funeral, or sorry, you don't see too many moving trucks or U-Hauls following a funeral, right? Or a hearse, right? A car with the casket in it, because you don't take anything with you. And so to me, it's all about the experience. It's about how you treat people, how you live your life. And that to me is far more important than that is what I see as success. In a sort of a joking way, I had my friends are putting together this birthday party for me, right? It's a milestone, turning 40, and I look at this and I go, success for me is seeing all my friends and family there and seeing people that I love and I care about. And one, because they're there and I feel special about that, but also 2, because it's a realization of the effort you put into being a good person and the effort you put into making good decisions. That to me is what's most valuable. It's character. It's, genuineness. Those things are, I think, to me, what matters.
Okay, great. I'm gonna do one last check for questions in the room. Doesn't look like we have any more. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for taking the time out of your day to be here. We all really appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and put everything you put in the chat on our GroupMe, which is our group chat, and so they can all access that information. And you might be hearing from some students once they reach out to
Cool.
you via email. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Anytime. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. Keep in touch.
Cool. Okay. If you guys have any other questions just about pre-law in general, or yes. Yeah, we're gonna put all the stuff you put in the chat in the GroupMe as well. But that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I think that's everything. So you guys can come up. Oh my God. You guys can come up and take a picture if you want, or you can see it from there. Also, oh yeah, so the meeting's over now. But thank you all for being here again. We'll have meetings weekly, same time, probably same place. Sometimes it'll move around, but just check the GroupMe. If you haven't paid your dues yet, you can come up here and we can talk about that. If you're not in the GroupMe yet, we can also help you out with that. Anything else? You guys can also come up and talk to us, but otherwise, hope you all have a good day. Thank you for being here.